Welcome to NICTITATING Presents a genre interview series. My guest today is Christa Carmen. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Can't complain. So, yeah, I guess getting right into it. When's the first time you, if you can remember, you actively sought publication for one of your stories?
Oh, goodness. The first time, well, I will tell you, I know that it was too early, meaning you got to start somewhere, right? But
Yeah.
looking back with my perfect writerly hindsight now, it was probably 2014, and I had written what I at the time thought was an incredibly, novel and clever story. And now looking back, it's like so embarrassing. It's a very quintessential deal with the devil story, so much so that I titled it A Deal with the Devil and like thought I was clever.
Well, yeah, it's, postmodern and ironic.
Yeah, right. But yeah, it was in 2014. I had written a ton of short stories and felt like I sort of a little bit knew what I was doing and started, I got a subscription to Duotrope and started searching markets and yeah, started submitting for publication and got into a few little e-zines and got a little bit of confidence under my belt and just kept writing and submitting from there.
Well, yeah, that's the way to do it. That's pretty much what I did. I think I started in, 2011. Yeah, it takes a while.
Yes, and a lot of thick skin.
So, yeah, a lot of rejections. So you told me off air that you have another collection. What state is that in? Is it kind of compiled but waiting on more edits, or is it somewhat finalized, or?
Oh God, I don't think it's even that far along yet. It's basically just I have a lot of stories that kind of touch on similar themes, and I basically have just been keeping a running table of contents list of what I want to include in the collection. And it includes, a fair amount of stories that have been published already. I think there's three right now that I would want to be new to the collection, not previously published. And then I have like two more that I want to include, but that I have like out pending, sitting with markets right now that will, hopefully get published. So yeah, then depending on if those stories even are published, or even a couple of the stories that just came out in anthologies this year, I'll obviously have to wait for all of the rights to revert back to me and, yeah, go from there. But I do have a pretty solid table of contents list of probably 80% know what I want to include.
So you said you have a running table of contents. When you're kind of conceptualizing and thinking about a new collection, how do you come up with the order? Do you just sort of put all the stories in a list and then more or less wait until someone expresses interest? Or how do you, because I know I just kind of tinker with the list and then eventually go, okay, it's fine.
Yeah. So I guess so when I put the first collection together, um, the final order that the stories ended up in was definitely not how I submitted it to Eddie Generous from Unnerving. I think it was pretty close. Like I had sat down for a while and tried to, I had like a novella length piece in there and I had a couple flash pieces. So first I tried to spread out, just kind of, make the length, not put flash right with flash and put the novella kind of at the 2/3 mark so that if people had stuck with me that far, they were like cool with reading something a little bit longer. Um, and then I tried to put more of the tone of the pieces into consideration. So I think most of the slightly more humorous stuff was front loaded. I think there was one, I mean, not so much humorous, but like there's a more hardcore kind of like slasher inspired story that's in the second half or even the last third of the book. But yeah, I just tried to make it like a good balance of things throughout and then kind of go up on an upward crescendo, a little bit of a crescendo to more intense stories at the end, so that the last story was hopefully hard hitting. And that's kind of what I'm doing this time around. I mean, it's a little different because I'm not completely, so there's like there's the two couple of them that, if they don't get published, will I maybe tinker with them a little bit more? Probably. So yeah, I think I'm just trying to spread things out same way, lengthwise, tone wise, and then go from there and see how it all fits together and read it one time through with everything as I think it should go and see how it kind of moves along and if anything stands out as being really misplaced.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I know personally when I kind of make a list, compile, sometimes I'll wait a month and then go back and be like, I don't like this one or I don't like that one. Do you ever run into that with like cutting stories entirely?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you made a good point too about like waiting a month for for anything in writing. It helps so much, but it's so difficult to do because I have like impulse control problems. Like I finished this story. It's great. I want to send it out right now instead of, I've gotten much better about waiting and sitting on something for a little bit, and that definitely goes for, the order of a collection to what's in a short story to begin with. I just find that if I can instill a bit of patience into my day-to-day writing activities, everything comes out better in the long run. It's just sometimes, and I mean, sometimes you can't, right? Like sometimes if you really want to submit something for an anthology call and the deadline's looming, you just gotta, right?
Right, you just have
Yeah.
to send what you
But
have.
ideally, like that has happened to me before, and I've gotten, lucky or had good experiences with that on occasion. But a lot of times what happens is, you get a rejection and then you sit on it for a month and you're like, oh, I could have made it so much better if I just did this. And then you end up finding a good home for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense.
Are you working on anything right now that you've been sort of sitting on for a little bit
Oh
of?
man, I mean, so much of my catalog, like I am sitting on. I've got like a whole full length collection that's basically done, but obviously I'm waiting to see. It's out at a couple markets right now, and then I'm working on a novelette that once that's done, it's going to be compiled into like a themed collection, which
Cool.
is very daunting because it's going to have a wraparound, like novella length thing.
Oh, that's interesting though. That's cool.
It is. I wish I hadn't decided to do it because it's taken me
Yeah.
so many years of like basically I figured out you can't write an effective wraparound until you have all the stories done and sort of more or less in the order you want them,
Right.
which is fine, except then you actually have to have every single story done and in the order you want them. So that takes a lot of extra time. And
Right. It's a very ambitious project though. I think it sounds great.
thank you. I hope so. Ideally, it was. I don't want to dwell on this too long, but it was. Basically, I released a separate novella, and I've had stories here and there and other things that are in the same universe, with the plan always to put them into one collection. And I think particularly with the novella length or the longer stories, releasing them separately, I guess that was an attempt to be like, well, hopefully they'll be good enough if I, put a lot of extra time into them. But yeah, so that's the goal.
I'm sure it will be great. It sounds great.
Thank you. So I don't want to go into this too much, but you mentioned that you had written a novel off air.
Yes.
And I guess I don't really want to go into the plot or anything spoilery or anything like that, but just talk about the general
Yeah.
process of novel writing. How long does it? You said you've written two, and I assume one was trunked. If you're like me.
Yeah, I have two completed trunked novels. I have a third that's like, I always think of that novel and I think like I always think I didn't get very far in it, but then sometimes I'll go back and look at a notebook on this third novel and be like, oh my God, I actually wrote kind of a lot of this. So I have like a trunked, incomplete novel that I never finished. Um, and then, yes, I've spent the past 2 years working on a very research heavy, dark historical fiction novel historical fiction novel that was very redundant, historical novel that, yeah, it's taken me a long time. And, you know, the previous novels that were trunked, it sounds so trite, but it is true. They really were great learning experiences. I tried to do a lot of different things with the novels. I tried, the first novel was like this multi-year spanning gothic horror novel with like thriller and suspense elements to it, and like this twist ending that really didn't work for I should have stuck with like a straight gothic horror novel and not tried to insert a dash of Agatha Christie into the plot. And then the second chunked novel is a little bit of the same. It's like a cult, like a horrific cult thriller. And again, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna mash up so many things because it's all the genres that I love to read and I thought I loved to write them, but I'm much better sticking with like kind of the straight like gothic horror, psychological horror, body horror, like even this historical horror in a way. But yeah, when I try to get all Agatha Christie, it's not my strong point. So like I get so wrapped up in outlining and pulling pulling the rug out from under the reader's feet, or pulling the wool over their eyes, however many cliches I can pack into one description of my former novel writing practices. But yeah, they were great learning experiences because like I know what my weaknesses are. I know the type of writing I enjoy doing a lot more now. And this last novel was, even though it took me kind of just as long, it was a much more straightforward and enjoyable and I think fruitful process. So hopefully I can find a home for it and I will prove that statement true.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like it.
That would be
I think
nice.
everyone's
Yeah.
first novel, they have all these like grand ideas, like I'm going to do all of this stuff, and then they actually get into it and realize like maybe I should just learn how to write a novel
Right.
first and then go. I know with my first one I trunked, it was like, I'll have it be like a road trip serial killer thing and have it be like very tough psychologically because you got to side with a killer kind of a thing. And then I just finished it and I was like, yeah, no, it doesn't work.
Right. But yeah, I mean, hey, it's better than like riding that all the way through and like, I mean, because not that there's great self-published stuff out there, of course, but sometimes if you get a really stubborn person that just says, I'm gonna ride this
I was
through,
very on
and
the fence with putting it out, but I'm glad I got beta readers because I got some very negative feedback on it, and it wasn't so much the quality as like the themes and like the tone.
yeah,
So I figured like, maybe have this not be my first one.
right, yep,
But writing the first one like taught me a lot of things. So then when I wrote The Demon, which is my first published novel, I thought, well, okay, I can do this, and now it's out.
yes, very good.
And part of a series, which I hate that I decided to do.
Well, that's exciting though, whether or not it's something that you're gonna. How many books there will be in the series?
3, so I wrote the first one, and I've got the other 2 basically mapped out in my head. It just becomes, I kind of want to do like standalone novels in between and actually like establish myself. Because I self-published the first novel, and I think it still holds up, but it was very much a like, okay, well, this is a very personal project, so like I don't care if anybody else wants to put it out.
Well, that works.
Yeah, but I mean, I would like to have other people put out my other novels, so. Let's see. So when you come up with a story or a novel idea or anything like that, is it generally you're just sitting there one day and the idea comes to you, or do you intentionally kind of sit down and think like, all right, what would be a good story idea, or is it a little of both?
Yeah, I definitely think I do both. I think it's more enjoyable for me to kind of have an idea strike me and be like, oh, that would be so cool. And then what if this? And what if this? And then I sit down and just kind of jot it. I have a little idea notebook, and I'll jot down what came to me and what I think I can do with it. And typically what I've found is if the idea is such that like I can't get it out of my head, and within like a couple days I find myself sitting down and putting pen to paper and going somewhere with it, that's when it becomes something. There have been times where like I've said, oh, I've been working on, over the past 2 years, oh, I've been working on my novel for like 3 months straight. I'm going to take a little break and maybe write some short fiction, even though I don't have an idea. And then I'll like go to my ideas notebook and be like, oh, this was cool. But now, however much time has passed, a year, 4 months, even a couple weeks, the urgency is gone, and like suddenly it's not as good as, Jesus Christ, as good of an idea as I initially thought. So yeah, it's funny because I should probably just go into the idea notebook and like scratch out everything that I thought of and then didn't immediately do something with, because it doesn't typically work that way. And then, yeah, there have been calls for anthologies where I've really wanted to submit something and it's a theme, and I'll just sit down and try and come up with something. And again, there's like a good way for me to do that and a bad way I've found. And usually if I'm just like mulling over it and trying to strong arm something into taking shape, it doesn't work. But if I sit down and start like writing out some of my thoughts about the theme and where I could potentially go with it, then something usually comes of it. So I guess I think what's actually happening is it's like the theme is either resonating with me or it isn't. And then when I actually sit down and start to do the work, like it becomes clear one way or the other. There was recently an anthology that for months I really wanted to submit to. It was the Corpus Press Fear of the Future anthology. And, it was just sounded like such a cool idea, and it seemed like it was going to be such a great anthology that I really wanted to submit to. And I just kept trying to conceptualize something, and I kind of just realized that like science fiction horror is really not my strong suit. And I tried to get, I think I got like a couple thousand words down, and I was just like, this isn't working. I have to call it a day. So, and usually I don't even get that far. Usually I just know that it ain't gonna happen and put it aside.
Now, do you ever go back to those abandoned ideas, or do you ever kind of data mine from longer works that you decide, I don't really want to keep pursuing this?
I always tell myself I'm gonna go back, but I have yet to, so it doesn't seem like...
I mean, I personally think like the better ideas, they just stick in your head anyway.
Yeah.
Even though it's good to write down ideas, I feel like the stuff that you really want to do and that you realize is really going to work, like kind of just comes to you, and you might do the association like, oh, this was from this sort of.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, do you write a lot of, I know this is kind of simplifying it, but I feel like there's two kinds of short story writers, or writers in general. There's the ones that spend and like, meticulously try to be a perfectionist about like maybe one story. And then there's the other type, which is probably myself, where you just write it. And if you don't like it, you just write another one. And if you don't like that one, you write another one.
Yeah. God, I feel like every time I write a story, it's like that story is the best thing I've ever written. And I'm like, I'm not going to write anything better than this. And everything that I've written before this is crap. This is the one that like, this is great. I can't do any better than this. And then, a month or a couple months pass. I unfortunately haven't been, I've aimed to write like a new short story every month this year. And I definitely did not meet that goal, but it was fine. I kept working on the novel, and I think I wrote three complete and finished and submitted out in the world, waiting for some responses, short stories. And I have one more that I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to finish before the end of the year. But yeah, I forgot where I was going with that now. Just everything that I write at the time, it seems like it's great. And then, I write the next one and I'm like, oh, actually, this is better than the last one. So I think I'm like a weird mix of that, where I think, maybe it's just a way for my brain to keep motivating me to write the next thing. Like, you can do better than the last one, even though you thought this one was great at the time.
No, I mean, that's good, though. I don't know. I just tend to. I probably shouldn't do this, but I'll write one and then submit it like one or two places. It gets rejected, and I go, well, it's burned. I can't ever use this. And then I just move on to another one. Again, I think it's easier psychologically for me to do it that
Yeah,
way,
you gotta
but maybe not
do
the best
whatever
way.
works for you.
So I guess moving away from the prose for a little bit, where do you, it's going to sound creepy saying where do you live, but like roughly where do you live?
Yeah, I'm in New England. I'm in Rhode Island. It's a pretty big epicenter of the horror community. There's been Necronomicon and Necon in Providence and Portsmouth, respectively. Although Necon has moved for when we ever have a Necon again, thanks COVID. But yeah, I'm in Rhode Island, and it's been great to be here as a writer because there's so much cool stuff that goes on, and there's a great community, and yeah, it's a great place to write. Even in Westerly, my hometown. I mean, this is really not a secret that I live in Westerly. But there's a lot of writers in Westerly, and like we have a really cool local bookstore, and it's pretty vibrant community. Again, COVID has, as it has for everyone, put a bit of a damper on things, but hopefully we will come back from that.
That's cool. I mean, I used to, I lived around Boston, and I'd still end up in Providence more often than not for my literary endeavors. So, yeah, it's definitely, Rhode Island's great.
Yeah, it's a great city.
Do you find that setting plays a part in your work, or is it sort of just, like whatever you come up with in your head, you kind of set something based on that?
Oh no, I'm a pretty big slave to setting things. I've set, oh God, probably 95% of what I've written, not only in New England. If it's not in New England, let me rephrase that. If it's not in Rhode Island, it's definitely in New England. I think there's been, God, a small handful of, like, I wrote a short story this summer that is set in Italy and Ireland. I've written some things I wrote something set in Colorado at Estes Park, Stanley Hotel. I write, the novel that I've been working on is set in Rhode Island. I think the first novel I wrote was set in Maine because, what's more inventive than a debut horror writer trying to do something set in Maine. But yeah, I do find that setting, like, I'm not one of those people that completely subscribes to the notion that, like, you can only write what you know, and if you're not writing something that you don't have an intimate knowledge of, like, don't even think about it. But I do think that for my writing, at least, it helps me so much to ground a story in a place that I know like the back of my hand, because it allows me to do so much more with the other aspects of the work. Like, I feel like I can concentrate on creating characterization for, a completely fictional, made up person when they're grounded in a place that, I can describe on a whim, 6 ways from Sunday, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I found my workaround lately has been setting things in random parts of random deserts, so it doesn't matter if I've been there because it's like, oh, it sounds normal.
Yeah, that works too. Like a kind of like not nondescript, but like a more muted setting so that you can raise the stakes for all the other aspects of the work. I like that too.
Oh, yeah, I tend to, I've written a story that was set in Detroit and then New Mexico. But in Detroit, it's just set in a parking garage, and then in New Mexico, it's just set like at a diner in the desert. So
that's cool. So it can kind
yeah,
of
it
be
seems
like,
my workaround is to have a very general thing that would be the same more or less anywhere.
yeah, I like that.
I know you have a dog. I've seen pictures of your dog. It's very cute.
I was actually thinking like a couple minutes ago that you were going to get the occasion of hearing her howl. I don't know if like a FedEx man or something pulled into my driveway, but she was sitting with me. She went into high alert mode and her ears pricked up, and she's since abandoned me for her vantage point in the front window.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I'm surprised my cat hasn't bugged me to get in yet. I think it's because I fed her the rest of her breakfast. She was good. She's probably taking a nap.
Nice. I wish I could do the same. That little afternoon nap would be nice.
Yeah, I hear you. Have you always been a person that's had dogs, or have you just kind of recently got into owning dogs?
I had a dog growing up, but when you're like a little kid and your parents do the work for taking care of it, it's kind of like more of a backdrop to your life than it is something that you really like identify with being a dog owner kind of thing. And then we did have another dog, like when I was in college, that wasn't, she was like my parents' dog. So, excuse me, I got Maya when, oh my goodness, I got her when she was like 6 weeks old in 2008. So she's almost 13. So I've had her for quite some time, and she is my only dog and the only dog that, is like mine.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's about the same age as my cat, I think. We don't really know because we adopted her.
Yeah.
We think she was around one when we adopted her, so probably 13.
Nice. It's a good age. They're nice and like settled in. Like, she still has
Yeah,
energy and wants to do stuff, but she's like well behaved. Well, for the most part, she's well behaved. She can be a little bit of a brat sometimes.
yeah, no, I mean, that's good. I always joke that my cat's going to outlive me. So,
Oh God.
yeah, I see pictures of those cats online that it's like, world's oldest cat, 35. And I'm like, that's going to be my fucking cat, isn't it? Um,
Uh,
you ever written about dogs? That's kind of a dumb question, but
no, it's great. Right? It's like, actually, it's a totally good question because it's so funny. Obviously, as horror fans, I'm sure we all feel the same that like you don't want the dog. If the dog dies in the horror movie, you're just flat pissed off.
I think it's just lazy too, to be honest.
But right. It's like a cheap way to either get a scare or to, I don't know, get some sort of emotional reaction from your audience. But it's funny because I don't want to give any spoilers, but like I will just say I won't even say it's the dog. It's not the main dog. I'll put it that way. I almost walked into the trap of like letting my plot. I like to let my plot and the characters themselves guide me in the story. I try not to strong arm it too much, but I almost like let the story take me to a place where I was going to kill a dog in this novel, and then I like took a step back and was like, what are you doing? You will be the very person that you despise. Like, find another way to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish without killing the dog. So, yeah, I only recently dealt with not only writing about dogs, but trying to not be a cliche horror writer and kill the dog off.
I mean, it's tricky sometimes. I know one of my earliest stories, I was sort of an edgelord in my 20s, so I was like, it's all about a dead dog. And
Mm-hmm.
then I read it and was like, oh, eh. And it's, set in my themed universe, but needless to say, I'm not using it in the new themed collection. A, because it's an early story, and B, because it's literally just like, guy hits a dog, and then he thinks the dog's still alive.
Oh boy. Interesting.
Yeah, so sort of low-hanging fruit. Um, but you gotta get all that edgelordy stuff out of your system.
You do. You absolutely do.
Uh, some of the stories you've done from, oh god, now I'm blanking on your collection's name. Um,
Something borrowed, something blood soaked. It's totally okay. It's been, kind of a while
I
since
was
it was
about to say
published at
like
this point.
something blue, but I'm like, I know it's not something blue.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, like gothic horror, psychological horror. Like, what would you say you tend to write?
I think that collection I'm still really happy with excuse me, how the kind of range of stories, like I know we talked earlier and I said, they're kind of connected by tone and theme, more connected by theme. The tones kind of vary throughout, but I kind of prided myself on the fact that like that collection represented all my different loves in the horror genre. Like there's like a post-apocalyptic but also slightly more abstract story in it. There's like a very visual kind of horror movie inspired piece. There's some like tongue in cheek, kind of more humorous flash stuff. There's definitely some gothic, definitely some psychological. Um, there's like a Christmas Carol retelling, but set on Halloween. It's kind of like runs the gamut of all different genres. I think I mapped out once, or I started like if people were awesome enough to want like a signed copy of the book, and I was like trying to write cool stuff in the front. I realized that like I was like, I hope you enjoy all of and then I would like write like a little thing of what is contained in each story, and I realized it's like I was writing to people like, I hope you enjoy all of the witches, serial killers, ghosts, more ghosts, zombies, post-apocalyptic inciting rains, long buried corpses, newly opened mausoleums, sinister trains, and out-of-place staircases contained within these stories. And I was like, damn, that is like all over the place, but yet I hope, still somehow works.
No, I think so. I don't know. I hate writing all that stuff. I had Screaming Creatures come out, which is actually the first NICTITATIng books book that came out, available on
Very
Amazon.
cool.
Um,
There you go.
but just thinking of it, and I think also because I put it out myself and edited it myself, there was this extra like, oh, I feel like such a cheeseball, like having to come up with
Oh,
the description myself
right. The
too.
like cover or
Uh,
what do you call it? Like the back cover
yeah, I
kind
don't
of
even
stuff.
remember, but so I don't know. I just did like that. I was like contains this and this and this and this and yeah, it's sort of all over the place, but I thought it worked. Hmm. Well, I'm sort of running out of writing questions and questions in general, so I was thinking we might get to the random ass interview section of the interview, which is usually fairly short because I don't write any of them ahead of time and
That's totally fine.
purported to be random, though honestly, there's nothing you can come up with out of your own head that's truly random. So let me see here. Are you more of a desktop or a laptop person?
Like in general or where I do my writing?
Either.
So I do have like a monitor for my desktop so that I can see things on a bigger screen. I used to be a predominantly handwritten, okay, so not used to be. I handwrite all of the first drafts of all of my stories. I used to do that on paper with pen, but I have since made the most wonderful purchase of my life, which was to get an iPad Pro with an Apple second generation Apple Pencil. And there's an app that's basically like note paper on the iPad screen, and I can handwrite on the screen, but then I can like, what do you call it? Like do a screen grab of everything that's on the screen and convert my handwriting to text, because I used to despise, like I'd finish writing a
Oh, that's pretty
story
great.
and I'd be like, oh, I'm so excited. Now I can like edit it and turn it into something not this crappy first draft. But then I would have to sit down and type the whole goddamn thing out. And I'm a fast typer, and it would still be a process that took way too long and would just drive me crazy because it kind of put a rift into the process. Like I'd be all jazzed up to start editing, and I'd have to spend a day because, unfortunately I don't write full time. I wish I did, but if it takes me 2 hours to write out or to type out a, 6,000 word story, then I've lost like most of my writing time for the day. So yeah, this app is like, and there's still some glitches in the app. Like, I don't know if I just don't know how to use it perfectly, but like when you do convert it over to text and you send it to, like I use Word. I tried to use Scrivener before, but it didn't work for me. But when you send it over to Word, like sometimes the paragraphs, like the line spacing is off, and like it uses all plain text quotation marks. So if you don't like those, you have to convert those. Sometimes like it doesn't get your correct spelling at all. So there's like a little bit of an editing process, but I've found, I mean, it's no worse than the mistakes. Like even as a good typist, I still make transcription mistakes typing my shit out. So Yeah, it's phenomenal. So then once it's on the computer, then I'm like a laptop person and I'll bring my laptop, like I'll write all over my house. Like I'll sit in, I have like a little day bed in my office. I have a desk in my office. I'll sit in my regular bed on the couch. If it's nice outside, I'll sit on the deck and I just sort of cart my laptop around and work on the edits until it is finished.
That's a good way to do it. I like experimenting with all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I recently was trying to get into, well, not recently, within the last couple of years, like dictating, like speech to text, but it's such a
Yes, I
different
tried that.
process to just speak it. Like I was like, oh, I'll just speak I'll just
Yeah.
freestyle a whole story. And then of course you try it and it's like, oh, this is very different.
Right.
But yeah, I don't know if you can hear my cat, but she's going nuts.
She's awake from her nap.
She has awoken from the nap, yes. Um, do you have a favorite kind of rock? I mean, like a literal rock, not the music genre.
Like a favorite kind of rock, like somewhere in the world, like a mountain range, or like a favorite kind of rock, like I like crystal quartz kind of thing.
The latter, like crystals or
Yeah, I
whatever.
do have, I'm like looking around my office right now. I have a lot of amethyst and citrine, or like, what is it? Like citrine colored quartz. Oh God, I'm butchering it, I'm sure. But yeah, I have a lot of amethyst. I have like a kind of a black and purple theme in my office. So yeah, I will say amethyst.
That's cool. I have a lava rock on my bookshelf.
Nice.
Probably shouldn't mention this, but I got it from somewhere, and then after the fact, I found out you're not supposed to be taking them.
Uh, I've heard people have similar
But I'm
stories
also
like
like, but
that.
it's all over the place. I mean,
Uh, well, your secret's safe with me and whoever listens to this.
all two people that listen to this.
Well,
No,
those two people better keep their mouths shut.
it's fine.
And I'm sure
I'm
it'll be
sure
more than two people.
it's more than two people. Do you prefer? This isn't so random. Do you prefer to write during the day or during the night? Assuming you have like an unlimited amount of time, which is obviously not true. But if you did, would you prefer to write during the day or the night?
Right. Um, so that's actually a good question. I don't even know if I know the answer. I think it depends on, like I know you said if you had all the time in the world kind of thing, but even for the purposes of answering the question, I feel like I can't separate it from like the rest of my life because I feel like if I've had a really rough long day and even if I have the whole evening free, like sometimes I just can't write because if I'm mentally exhausted, I force I can usually edit at night, but like writing something, I think that's probably a good way to rambling. That's probably the best way to differentiate it. I think if I'm writing something new, I'm best in the morning with a sharp mind and a little bit more motivation. But I can edit at any time of the night, especially if there's like a deadline I'm trying to hit. If I have to,
No, I mean that makes sense. I guess sort of similar.
yeah,
Although I will say I've tried to get into editing like late at night because my partner and I both work from home now, and
hmm
there are days when it's like 2 in the morning and like just trying to edit,
yeah,
just trying to think
yeah.
is
And at a
just like
certain point of
this
the
is not
evening, do you
working.
find that like the blue light of like the backlit computer screen feels like it's piercing your brain through your eye sockets, and you're just like, I can't look at this computer screen anymore.
I wish I had that problem because I'm staring at screens all day.
Yeah,
But
well, true, aren't we all?
uh, no, it's more. I guess it's more. I don't want to have like every light on in the house because that's like a little oppressive. But then it's
Yeah,
like a little harder to see with my mood lighting, and yeah, it's also I think just my brain's like. I mean, I have a weird schedule, so half the time I'm waking up at noon anyway. But even still,
yeah, it's tough.
like at 2, my
Yeah,
brain is
I
just
feel
like
you.
not as crisp. Um, hmm. Let's see. What do you think the most Rhode Island thing is about Rhode Island?
Oh God. So the most Rhode Island thing about Rhode Island is if you ask a Rhode Islander to do something and they don't want to do it because it's quote unquote too far. So like we're the smallest state, obviously, and it really only
Right.
takes like, obviously there are offshoots from the main drag of, like 95, Route 95 that cuts up through the state. You can take offshoots and it's, longer. But for the most part, like you can drive through Rhode Island in about 52 minutes. And yet,
Yeah.
like growing up in high school, we had University of Rhode Island is like 25 minutes from where I live. And if there were parties going on, like we would want to go to, we were like younger too, and it would be the coolest thing ever to go to a college party. But even still, we'd be like, but it's too far. It's too far. And even like today, like when I'm totally not a partier doing anything like that, but it's like, oh yeah, I have a good friend from high school that lives in Wakefield, and me and my husband have been trying to get together with him and his wife forever, and he lives one town over. It's like 16 minutes away, and it's always just like, oh, but it's kind of far to drive there. So that if you think it's far to go 15 minutes to meet a friend for dinner, then you live in Rhode Island.
Well, that's fair. I mean, my whole conception of time has changed just from COVID, but also,
Well, yes,
I used
true.
to live around Boston and I would drive like default 45 minutes just anywhere.
Yes, I used to live in Boston too. And it's funny because when I lived in Boston, that whole Rhode Island mentality faded away. And I would meet a friend, across town for dinner. But I lived in Revere and she lived in Somerville. And with traffic, like it took 45
It'd
minutes.
be like a full
Yeah.
hour, yeah.
And, today I'm like, oh my God, going somewhere 45 minutes for dinner, that would be like a nightmare.
Well, I was going to say, like, now that I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is also a small
Oh, wow.
city, you can drive through it in about 20 minutes or less. Now, yeah, if I want to do something in Albuquerque, I'm like, wow, it's almost an hour away, though, which is like, I used to drive an hour every day by
Yeah.
default, but
I will have to pack a lunch.
yeah,
Yeah, see, so you've
it's
got a bit of
true.
the Rhode Island mentality too.
So I've basically run out of things to ask. Is there anything in particular you want to plug?
Yeah, sure. So, well, this has been out. Well, I guess special edition copies have been out for a little while, but the main publication of Sarah Tantlinger edited a horror anthology written by all women in horror called Not All Monsters. And that is out and contains one of my short stories, along with some other really rad female horror authors. And then I just had a story come out in the anthology One of Us, and it's a tribute to Frank Michaels Arrington, who was a really lovely man and a really wonderful part of the horror community who very sadly passed away. And Todd Kiesling and Bloodshot Books and Kenneth Kane decided to come together and put together an anthology in his honor, and it's an awesome lineup. And I guess like I haven't even gotten my copy yet. I keep saying I need to get on that, but Stephen King has like a reprint in it, which is just kind of cool to share a table of contents with him, even though it's a little different. This is a reprint, but whatever. But like Josh Mallerman has a story in it. Stephanie Witovich. There's like a really awesome lineup. So I'm excited to have that come out, and it goes to a really great cause. It's a charity anthology to support transplants.
Yeah, that
So
sounds.
yeah, and then hopefully in like, I don't know, a year, maybe, who knows. I hope to have a new novel and a new short story collection coming out like sometime in the near-ish future.
Nice. It's all exciting stuff.
Thank you. How about you? What is your next release or your latest one?
Oh, lordy. Let's see. Well, I've had to reshuffle some stuff, so probably the next release is going to be. The working title was acclivity, but then I looked up what acclivity means, and it actually means a like slope up a incline instead of what I thought it meant, which was like rising as in into the sky. So I changed it to astrum, which is a Latin word, I think, for star.
Cool.
But anyway, my novelette about aliens will be coming out probably February or March. It's going to be ebook only, from, of course, NICTITATIng Books. And then well, I won't say shortly after that, but after that, I'm planning on either putting out Maxwell Bauman's Haunted House novella or Paula Ash's ebook only story or a collection, and then from there, just all sorts of other stuff. Personally, I have one collection entirely done, and then another one that I will probably start working on, which is a Whispering Pines themed collection, which might be 2022. So that might be the next full-length book for me, but don't quote me on that, because as I've learned as a publisher now, it's all shuffling and things change month to month.
Oh, very
Thank
exciting
you.
stuff.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It was really great.
Yeah, not a problem. Yeah, go pick up Christa Carmen's books. She also has Something Borrowed, Something Blood-Soaked, which is her first full-length collection. I've read it. I enjoyed it.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem. And everyone stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more interviews in store.